Title: The Alpha King rejected her while she carried his heir. Moonlight rejected Luna returns. Full audiobook. He rejected his fated Luna at her coronation, not knowing she was carrying his heir. By the time he found out, all she left was a letter. Before the entire pack, he shattered their bond. I reject you. Alone, broken, she disappeared into the night and gave birth, with no one by her side. When the Alpha King finally learned the truth, that she carried his child, his heir, he ran to find her. But when he arrived, they didn't take him to her. They gave him this. My Alpha. If you're reading this, then the moon has taken me where you cannot follow. I waited for you, longer than I should have. Even after you rejected me, even after my heart broke in front of everyone, I still believed you would come. I wasn't alone like you thought. You left me with something beautiful. Our son. He has your eyes, your strength. I hope he never carries your pain. I wanted to hate you. I tried, but I couldn't. Because even in my last moments, I still loved you. Take care of him. And please, don't let him grow up feeling rejected like I did. Goodbye, my Alpha. Now he has the heir he never wanted, but the woman who loved him died waiting for him to come back.
Chapter 1: The Rejection That Broke the Moon. The moon hung low and swollen, too bright, too watchful, as if it already knew what was about to happen. The entire pack stood in a perfect circle, their voices rising in reverence, their bodies bowed to the sacred moment. Silver light poured down like a blessing, wrapping around her skin, sinking into her veins. It crowned her, not with gold, but with something older. Something eternal. Luna. Her breath trembled as she stepped forward, heart racing not from fear, but from the bond. It pulsed between them, warm, alive, undeniable. He stood before her. The Alpha King. Her mate. Her forever. For a fleeting second, his eyes softened. Just enough to make her believe. Then he stepped closer. Close enough for only her to hear. I reject you. The words didn't sound loud. But they shattered everything. A violent force ripped through her chest, sharp, merciless. Like the moon itself had turned against her. The bond snapped. Not cleanly, but like something torn apart while still alive. The crowd gasped. Some stepped back. Others stared. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Her lips parted slowly, her voice barely holding together as she reached for the last thread of hope still clinging to her soul. I'm carrying your. He turned. Just turned. No hesitation. No remorse. And walked away. The words died in her throat. The moonlight that once embraced her now felt cold, distant, strange. Something inside her broke then, not loudly, not visibly, but completely. No scream came. No tears fell. Only silence. And in that silence, she stepped back, once, twice, before no one noticed when she turned. No one stopped her. No one followed. By the time the wind swallowed her scent, the Luna they had just crowned was already gone. Vanished into the night. Carrying a secret he would never hear. Chapter 2: The Night She Didn't Die. The forest swallowed her whole. Branches clawed at her skin, roots twisted beneath her feet, and the cold bit deep into her bones, but none of it matched the pain inside her chest. The place where the bond had lived now throbbed like an open wound, draining her strength with every step. She stumbled. Then fell. Her fingers dug into the damp earth as her breath came in shallow, uneven pulls. The rejection wasn't just heartbreak. It was unraveling her, slowly, mercilessly, as if her body no longer knew how to survive without him. A broken sound escaped her lips. Not a cry. Something quieter. Something final. But then. A faint movement. Deep within her. Her hand flew to her stomach, trembling. There it was again, small, fragile, alive. A breath hitched in her throat. "No," she whispered, shaking her head weakly. "Not you, you don't get to die because of him." The wind howled louder, the sky splitting open as rain crashed down in violent sheets. Thunder rolled above, shaking the ground beneath her as the storm closed in like something alive, something hunting. She forced herself up. One step. Then another. For the child. Only the child. But her body was already failing. Her vision blurred. The trees twisted. The world tilted. And then she collapsed. This time, she didn't rise. The storm raged on, merciless, swallowing her small, fragile form beneath shadows and rain, until footsteps approached. Not wolves. Different. Strange. A figure knelt beside her, brushing soaked hair from her pale face. For a moment, there was only silence, then their gaze dropped lower. To her stomach. And stilled. Their expression shifted, shock, then something close to fear. A quiet, trembling breath left their lips. This child. They froze. Is not normal. Chapter 3, The Child the Moon Marked. The words didn't fade, they settled into the air like a warning. By the time she woke, the storm was gone. So was the forest. Soft firelight flickered against wooden walls, shadows dancing in quiet rhythm. The scent of herbs filled the space, strange, unfamiliar, safe. But her body didn't feel safe. It felt different. Too different. Her breath caught as her hands moved instinctively to her stomach. It wasn't just life she felt anymore. It was movement. Strong. Aware. Waiting. No, her voice trembled, barely a whisper. It's too soon. Days passed, but they didn't feel like days. Her body changed faster than it should. The curve of her stomach deepened, her strength fading even as something inside her grew stronger. Every time the moon rose, the child responded, shifting, stirring, almost reaching. As if it knew the light. As if it remembered something she couldn't explain. And worse. It reacted to him. Every memory. Every flicker of his face in her mind sent a ripple through her, the child stirring with a quiet intensity that stole her breath. One night, beneath the pale glow filtering through the window, she curled onto her side, fingers tracing the life she carried. Tears slid silently into her hair. "You'll be stronger than me," she whispered. "You won't wait for someone who turns away." Her lips trembled as she exhaled softly. "I'll call you Kale." The name lingered, fragile and full of everything she had left. But her body was failing. Each breath grew heavier. Each heartbeat slower. And far away. In a palace that suddenly felt too quiet. The alpha froze mid-step. His chest tightened. Not pain. Not the bond. Something deeper. His hand pressed against his heart as his breath faltered. Once. Then again. Steady. Unfamiliar. His eyes darkened, confusion cutting through him as the rhythm echoed inside his chest. For the first time since the rejection, he felt a heartbeat. That wasn't his. Chapter 4, The Alpha's Uneasy Silence. It vanished as suddenly as it came. The silence that followed was louder than any roar. Behind him, the pack erupted in celebration. Laughter spilled through the halls, goblets raised high as voices praised his strength, his decision. Freedom from a weak Luna, they called it. But the sound grated against him. It felt wrong. He said nothing. Did nothing. Just turned away and walked into the quiet. Night after night, sleep refused him. Every time his eyes closed, the darkness whispered. Her voice. Soft. Broken. Unfinished. I'm carrying your. He would jerk awake, breath uneven, chest tight with something he refused to name. The moonlight didn't help. It followed him, through corridors, across stone floors, into places even shadows avoided. And under it, he felt it again. Not the bond. Something deeper. Something, watching. Days later, the reports came. Rogue territory. Strange energy disturbances. A woman seen near the borders alone, weakened, matching her description. He didn't react. Didn't ask questions. Didn't move. Coincidence, he said coldly, dismissing them with a wave of his hand. She's gone. And for a while, he forced himself to believe it. Until the night the moon rose full again. He stood alone, staring up at it, jaw clenched, eyes dark. When it hit him. Not a thought. Not a dream. A vision. Violent. Unforgiving. Her body arched in pain, fingers clawing at the earth, a scream tearing from her throat, not of weakness, but of survival. Blood. Rain. Moonlight. And her voice raw, breaking. Echoing inside his mind. His knees nearly gave out. Because this time, he didn't just see it. He felt it. Every ounce of her pain. Every breath she struggled to take. As if he was there. As if it was happening now. His eyes snapped open, horror flashing across his face. Because the truth finally broke through the silence. She wasn't gone. She was suffering. And somewhere beneath that same moon, she was screaming in childbirth. Chapter 5, The Birth No One Witnessed. The vision didn't leave him. It dragged him deeper. Her body trembled against the cold earth, fingers clawing at roots and soil as the storm raged above her. Rain soaked through her skin, mixing with tears she no longer had the strength to shed. There was no one. No pack. No mate. No bond to anchor her. Only pain, raw, relentless, consuming. Her breath shattered into broken gasps as another wave hit, forcing a cry from her throat that echoed into the empty forest. The moon hung above, watching, silent, unmoving. Please, she whispered, though no one was there to hear it. Her body arched. And then, everything stilled. For a single, suspended moment. The forest went quiet. No wind. No rain. No sound. As if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, the child was born. No cry followed. No fragile wail to announce life. Only silence. Her chest heaved weakly as she turned her head, barely holding onto consciousness, eyes searching, desperate. And then she saw him. Small. Still. But not fragile. His eyes were open. Glowing faintly beneath the moonlight, unnatural, aware, watching her with a calm that didn't belong to something just born. Her breath caught. A trembling hand reached toward him, fingers brushing his cheek as something inside her broke all over again, not from pain. But from something deeper. Something sacred. You survived, she whispered, voice barely there. The child didn't move. Didn't cry. He simply looked at her. And then, his lips parted. Soft. Clear. Impossible. Father. Chapter 6, The Letter Written in Dying Breath. The word lingered in the air, fragile, impossible, then vanished into the silence that followed. Her eyes filled with tears she no longer had the strength to hold back. You spoke, she whispered, her voice shaking as a faint, bittersweet smile touched her lips. But even as her hand rested against his small face, her body began to betray her. The warmth draining. The strength fading. Breathing growing thinner, slower. As if something inside her had quietly started to let go. She knew it. Not from fear. But from clarity. Time was slipping. Her gaze softened as she pulled herself upright with effort, cradling the newborn against her chest. The rogue healer had done what they could, but even their eyes had carried a truth they wouldn't say aloud. She was running out of time. No, not yet, she whispered, as if bargaining with the last threads of life still holding her together. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the small bundle beside her: parchment, ink, a simple quill. With shaking hands, she began to write. Each word came slowly. Each stroke heavier than the last. Not a message of anger. Not of regret. But of love she had carried alone, through rejection, through silence, through pain no one witnessed. Her breathing faltered as she paused, pressing a hand to her chest before continuing, forcing herself to finish what she knew he needed to hear. When the ink finally dried, she folded the letter carefully, holding it as though it were the last piece of her soul she could still give. Then she looked down at her son. Her fingers brushed his cheek again, memorizing every detail, as if time itself was already pulling her away from him. "I waited for you," she whispered, voice barely audible. "But I won't let him wait alone." A final breath left her lips. And in that moment, a decision settled in her heart, quiet, certain, unbreakable. She would not leave him behind. Not here. Not with strangers. Not with a world that had already rejected her. Her trembling hands gathered what little strength remained, and she made one final choice. Not to keep him. But to send him forward. To the only place his blood still belonged. Back to the Alpha King. Chapter 7, The Package He Never Wanted. Back when her decision was made, time seemed to slow. With the last of her strength, she wrapped her son carefully, shielding him from the cold, from the rain, from the world that had already been too harsh for his mother. Her trembling fingers pressed a lingering kiss to his forehead, soft, aching, final. "Go," she whispered, though no one stood beside her to answer. The rogues who had once sheltered her now stood at a distance, silent, respecting a request they didn't fully understand. One among them took the child with cautious hands, their expression unreadable. She did not look away. Not even as her vision blurred. Not even as her breath grew thin. Her eyes stayed fixed on the bundle leaving her arms, as though imprinting the moment into eternity. "Let him go where he belongs," she murmured faintly, her voice already fading. And then darkness crept in. Not sudden. Not violent. Just quiet. At the same time, far beyond the forest. The Alpha King stood within his territory, unaware of the storm crossing his borders. Until the gates sounded an urgent summons. Not war horns. Not council alarms. Something different. Unsettling. He arrived without delay, his presence commanding silence as guards parted before him. The air felt tight. Heavy. Like the world itself was holding something back. And then he saw them. Two figures kneeling at the gates. One holding a bundle. The other, a sealed letter. "Your Alpha," one of them spoke carefully, lowering their head. "We were told to deliver this, directly. No explanation. No warning. Just the child. And the letter." His gaze narrowed, instinct sharpening as he stepped forward. For a brief moment, hesitation flickered across his mind, but it vanished the instant his hand reached for the bundle. The moment his fingers touched the child. Something inside him collapsed. His wolf dropped to its knees. Not metaphorically. But in submission. His breath hitched violently as a surge of energy rippled through him, foreign yet familiar, as if recognizing something it had been missing, something it had lost. His grip tightened instinctively. The child didn't cry. Didn't resist. Only looked at him. Calm. Unblinking. Watching. The Alpha's pulse thundered in his ears as confusion cut through his composure for the first time in years. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, his hand shifted from the child to the sealed letter. His name was written on it. In a hand he would recognize anywhere. His fingers hesitated. Then broke the seal. And as his eyes lowered to the first line, everything inside him stilled. Because it began with My Alpha, if you're reading this. Chapter 8, The Truth That Came Too Late. His eyes didn't move at first. The words seemed to pull the air out of his lungs, each one carrying a weight he couldn't immediately name. The noise around him, guards, wind, distant movement, faded into a dull hum as his focus narrowed entirely onto the letter in his hands. He continued reading. Line after line. Her voice, though absent, felt unmistakably present in every word. Her pain. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Real. The rejection. The silence. The moment he turned his back without hearing what she had tried to tell him. His grip tightened slightly as he read on, his jaw setting, not in anger, but in something far more dangerous. Recognition. She had waited. Longer than she should have. Longer than anyone would have. And still, she had loved him. Even after everything. His breath slowed as the truth began to surface, not abruptly, but like a realization that had been waiting to break through all along. The child. His son. Not just born of blood, but something deeper. Something that stirred instinctively within him. The reaction he felt at the gates, the way his wolf had submitted, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was acknowledgement. Ancient. Unquestionable. His chest tightened as the final lines of the letter sank in, her acceptance, her sacrifice, her quiet goodbye written not in bitterness, but in love that had nowhere left to go. For a moment, he didn't speak. Didn't move. The world seemed to hold its breath around him again, just like it had the night he rejected her. But this silence was different. He lowered the letter slowly, his hand trembling, barely, but enough for those closest to notice. His expression cracked. Not with rage. Not with denial. But with something far heavier. Regret. Deep. Unavoidable. The kind that settles in and refuses to leave. His gaze shifted to the child still in his arms. His son. A life he had not been there to witness begin. A life she had carried, alone. His throat tightened. And for the first time since his coronation, the Alpha King spoke not as a ruler, but as someone undone. Take me to her. The words were firm. Certain. Final. But no one moved. No guard stepped forward. No rogue spoke. The air shifted. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Because the truth they carried was not something they were ready to deliver. Silence stretched. Then lingered. And in that silence, the Alpha realized something was wrong. Chapter 9, The Grave Without a Body. Take me to her. The command hung in the air, absolute. Still, no one moved. The Alpha's gaze hardened, his wolf pressing forward beneath his skin as tension spread through the gathering. One of the rogues finally stepped forward, not out of defiance, but hesitation. Follow us. They led him away from the gates. Not deeper into the stronghold, but outward. Toward the edge of the forest. The farther they walked, the quieter everything became. No chatter. No passing guards. Only the crunch of earth beneath their steps and the faint rustle of leaves stirred by an unseen wind. The child remained in his arms. Silent. Watching. Unblinking. When they finally stopped, the Alpha's eyes narrowed. Before him stood a clearing. Unremarkable at first glance. But the air here felt different. Heavy. Charged with something that refused to fade. Here, one of the rogues said quietly. This is where she was laid to rest. The Alpha stepped forward slowly, each step deliberate, controlled. His eyes scanned the ground, the surroundings, the faint traces left behind. A grave marker had been placed. Simple. Unadorned. Final. He knelt. His fingers brushed the soil. And then he froze. No scent. Nothing. No lingering trace of her existence. Not her blood. Not her presence. Not even the faint echo of life that usually remains where someone has fallen. His brows furrowed. He pressed his hand deeper into the earth. Still nothing. Behind him, one of the rogues spoke carefully. We found her, after the birth. She had already. Don't. The Alpha's voice cut through sharply. Not loud. But firm enough to silence them. His hand lifted slowly from the ground. Something wasn't right. Not here. Not in this place. His instincts screamed it. The earth itself rejected the story they were telling. He stood, turning his head slightly as his gaze swept across the clearing again. Empty. Too empty. No closure. No truth. Just absence. She isn't here, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. The rogues exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Because they had no answer. The Alpha's grip tightened around his son instinctively as his thoughts spiraled, fragmented pieces of the letter, the energy at the gates, the silence of this place. All pointing to something they hadn't considered. Or something they were not being told. And then. A small sound. Soft. Unexpected. The child shifted in his arms. His breathing changed. Uneven. Alert. For the first time since they arrived. The baby's gaze turned away from the grave. And fixed itself on the forest. His tiny fingers curled slightly. His eyes glowed faintly. Then. A cry. Clear. Strange. Uncontrolled. The first cry since birth. Not out of fear. But reaction. As if something out there had answered him. The Alpha's head snapped toward the direction the child was facing, his instincts flaring sharply. The forest stood still. Watching. Waiting. And in that moment, his son cried harder. As though recognizing something that the Alpha could not yet see. Chapter 10, The Child Who Remembers. The child's cry lingered in the air longer than it should have. Not fading. Not softening. Just echoing. The Alpha's gaze remained fixed on the forest, his instincts alert, his grip steady as he held the boy closer to his chest. But something had shifted. The clearing no longer felt empty. It felt observed. Unsettling. Unanswered. They left shortly after. No one spoke on the return journey. Not the rogues. Not the guards. And not the Alpha. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into something far less ordinary. The child grew. Too quickly. Not in bursts that could be explained away, but in a steady, unnatural acceleration that defied everything known about newborns. His features sharpened. His awareness deepened. His silence became less like infancy. And more like understanding. The Alpha watched it closely. At first, with curiosity. Then with something quieter. Something harder to admit. Concern. The boy did not behave like other children. He did not cry without reason. Did not react to noise the way others did. Instead, he listened. Observed. Processed. And sometimes, he remembered. It began subtly. The child would pause mid-movement, mid-gaze, as if something unseen had passed through his thoughts. Then his eyes would shift. Not aimlessly, but with recognition. Toward the moonlight. Toward silence. Toward moments that seemed to belong to no one else. One evening, as the Alpha stood near the window, the boy in his arms, the child suddenly reached upward, his small hand extending toward the pale glow outside. His lips parted slightly. And for a fleeting moment, his expression changed. Not confusion. Not curiosity. but something closer to familiarity. As though the light itself carried meaning. The Alpha's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. "Do you feel that?" he asked quietly, though he didn't expect an answer. The child didn't respond. But his gaze shifted. Not to the Alpha. Not to the room. But somewhere beyond. Somewhere distant. Unseen. That night, sleep did not come easily to the Alpha. And when it finally did, it was interrupted. A faint sound. Soft. Measured. A voice. He stirred, eyes opening slowly in the dim light of the chamber. The child stood near the edge of the room. Unassisted. Balanced. Still. The Alpha's breath caught for a fraction of a second. "You shouldn't be awake," he said, voice low. But the boy didn't react to the words. Instead, his head tilted slightly. As if listening to something only he could hear. Moments passed. Then the child spoke. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just, clearly. And with certainty that didn't belong to his age. "She's not gone." Chapter 11, The Hunt for a Ghost. The words hung in the dim chamber like a truth too heavy to ignore. The Alpha's eyes snapped fully open. For a moment, he didn't move. Didn't breathe. The child stood at the edge of the room, small yet steady, his gaze distant as though still listening to something far beyond the walls. The Alpha rose slowly, uncertainty giving way to something sharper, something restless. Questions he had been suppressing began to resurface. Not as thoughts, but as urgencies. That night, he made his decision. He abandoned the throne. Not in declaration. Not in ceremony. But in silence. Leaving behind council summons, reports, and duties that once defined him. The pack noticed his absence, but none could stop him. Because the Alpha was no longer ruling. He was searching. What began as a duty quickly became something else. Obsession. He moved through territories that did not welcome outsiders, speaking to rogues, elders, and those who dealt in forgotten knowledge. He followed rumors that most dismissed as myth. Strange energy patterns. Unexplained moon anomalies. Accounts of a woman seen where no one should survive. Each lead was inconsistent. Yet strangely, connected. Every path seemed to circle back to one idea. Not death. Transformation. He studied ancient records. Consulted those who understood things beyond conventional pack knowledge. The further he went, the clearer it became. Her disappearance didn't align with the end of a life. It aligned with something far more unusual. Something rare. Something that only occurred under specific lunar conditions, and only to those whose connection to the moon had been altered beyond breaking. The Alpha stood alone one night atop a ridge, the moon high above him. His expression hardened. Because for the first time since the rejection, he began to question everything he thought he knew. Not just about her, but about what he had done. And what it may have caused. Then the whispers began. From different sources. Unrelated voices. Fragments of stories passed cautiously, as if speaking them too clearly would invite consequences. A name. Not spoken openly. Not recorded officially. But remembered in older circles. A term tied to those who survived what should have destroyed them. Those who were rejected, and did not fade. The Alpha's hand tightened slightly at the mention. Because it didn't sound like a title. It sounded like a warning. And as the final piece of the puzzle surfaced through reluctant lips, the air around him seemed to still. The words came quietly. Almost unwillingly. But unmistakably. The moon's rejected vessel. Chapter 12, The Woman Beyond the Bond. The words lingered in his mind long after they were spoken. Not as rumor. Not as myth. But as something real enough to chase. The Alpha returned to the last confirmed trace of her presence, the edge of the forest, the border where reports had once described an unusual energy signature. This time, he didn't come as a ruler. He came as a hunter. Not of prey, but of truth. Beyond the known territories lay regions untouched by structured pacts. Lands where ancient forces were said to linger, where the rules of bonds and hierarchy often weakened. He followed the subtle signs. Shifts in air pressure. Distortions in moonlight. Energy that didn't behave like anything tied to a living pack, yet unmistakably alive. The deeper he went, the clearer it became. This was not random movement. It was a boundary. A threshold. And something or someone was on the other side. At the heart of a quiet, hidden territory, life moved differently. No chaos. No dominance displays. No constant tension. Only awareness. And balance. She stood among them. Unchanged in presence, but transformed in essence. Her posture was steady. Her gaze calm. No visible trace of the woman who once trembled beneath rejection. The air around her responded subtly to her movements, as though the environment itself recognized her authority without resistance. There was no bond tethering her now. No visible connection pulling her toward anyone else. She was complete. Independent. Unreachable. And yet, the moment the Alpha crossed the unseen boundary, something shifted. Not in the land. In her. A brief pause. A subtle stillness. Her eyes lifted, not in surprise, but in recognition. He had found her. But she did not move toward him. Did not react as he had imagined. Instead, she simply watched. As though observing something from a distance that no longer held the same meaning it once did. Because the woman he once rejected was no longer someone who could be claimed. Not by bond. Not by memory. Not by regret. And as their eyes met across the silent space between them, the Alpha realized the truth was no longer about finding her. It was about understanding what she had become. Chapter 13, The Reunion Without Recognition. The silence between them stretched, thick with everything unsaid. The Alpha took a step forward. Then another. Slowly, as though approaching something sacred or dangerous. His breath was steady, but not calm. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, reacting to her presence in a way he could no longer suppress. Because this time, it wasn't a bond pulling him. It was something deeper. More primal. More honest. He stopped several feet away from her. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world around them seemed to blur at the edges, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching this reunion unfold without interference. Then, without warning, the Alpha dropped to one knee. Not out of weakness, but recognition. His head lowered slightly, his voice quieter than it had ever been. I found you. The words carried weight. Not as a claim, but as an admission. His gaze lifted slowly. And there she was. Standing as she had been when he first saw her, yet entirely different in presence. Her posture no longer carried the hesitation of someone once uncertain. Her eyes held no trace of longing. No trace of expectation. Only stillness. Clarity. She looked at him. Not with hatred. Not with pain. But with a calm distance that made her feel unreachable. As if the man kneeling before her belonged to a version of her life she had already moved beyond. The Alpha's throat tightened slightly. For the first time since their separation, he said her name. Soft. Careful. Full of something he had never allowed himself to express before. Luna. The name left his lips like a memory. Like a hope. Like an apology he hadn't yet fully formed. She didn't react immediately. No flicker of emotion. No shift in expression. Only her eyes remained on him, steady, unbroken. Then, after a quiet pause, she spoke. Her voice was calm. Detached. Final. That name no longer belongs to me.
Chapter 14. The Choice That Breaks Blood. The words settled between them without echo, as if the forest itself refused to repeat them. The Alpha remained kneeling for a moment longer than necessary, absorbing the distance in her voice, the absence of anything familiar within it. Then he slowly rose, not to tower over her, but to face her as an equal. A silence followed, measured, tense, unresolved, and then, from behind him, a small shift, the child, held carefully in his arms. The Alpha turned slightly, his expression tightening, as though this moment required more courage than any battle he had ever faced. There is something you need to see. He stepped forward, not forcing, not demanding, just presenting. The boy looked toward her, not crying, not afraid, just watching, recognizing in a way that went beyond explanation. The air around them subtly changed. A faint, almost imperceptible reaction passed through her. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, not with emotion, but with something buried deeper, something remembered. Her gaze softened, barely, then steadied again. The Alpha noticed that brief shift, that fracture in her otherwise composed presence. Hope flickered within him, but it didn't last. She stepped back, not dramatically, not in rejection, but in distance, intentional, final. The moment passed. Her expression returned to calm control as though that fleeting recognition had been acknowledged, and then set aside. The child did not react, but the Alpha felt it, the subtle tightening in the air, the quiet confirmation that something undeniable had once connected them, but no longer defined her. He took a slow breath, searching for something, anything, that could bridge the gap. But there was none. No bond to rely on. No shared pain to reopen. No emotion she was willing to revisit. Only clarity and memory. She had not forgotten. That much was certain. But she had also not remained. Her eyes shifted between them. Him and the child. Measuring. Understanding. Accepting. Then she spoke. Not as someone torn. Not as someone conflicted. But as someone who had already resolved the conflict within herself long ago. Her voice was steady, unshaken, final in its delivery. Be an alpha, or be a father. A pause, a breath. Then the weight of her truth settled fully into the space between them. You cannot be both. Chapter 15. The Ending. No one expected her words didn't echo. They settled, final, absolute, unmovable. The Alpha stood still, the weight of her choice pressing down on him heavier than any crown he had ever worn. For a moment, the world narrowed to a single, impossible decision: power or presence, a throne or a son. His gaze shifted from her to the child in his arms. The boy looked back at him, not with confusion, not with fear, but with quiet awareness that seemed far beyond his years. Something in the Alpha's chest tightened. Slowly, deliberately, his grip on authority loosened, not in defeat, but in surrender, to something he had never truly understood before. He lowered his head slightly, not as a ruler, but as a man, and when he spoke, his voice carried none of the command the pack once feared. Only certainty. I choose him. The words were simple, but they cost him everything he once believed defined him. Silence followed, and in that silence, he turned, not away from responsibility, but toward what remained. When he looked back, she was gone, not rushed, not hidden, not taken, just no longer there. The space she had occupied felt unchanged at first glance, yet unmistakably different, like something essential had withdrawn from the world itself. The Alpha's eyes narrowed slightly as he stepped forward, scanning the area. No trace. No movement. No scent. Nothing to suggest departure. And yet, everything confirmed it. She was no longer bound to this place, no longer anchored to the limitations that once held her. The realization settled slowly, not as a loss, but as a truth he could no longer deny. His son shifted in his arms. The child's gaze lifted upward, toward the open sky beyond the trees. Still, focused. Then softly, almost instinctively, he whispered, "She's watching." The Alpha's breath paused. He didn't follow the child's gaze immediately, because something deeper within him already understood. And for the first time since the day he rejected her, he didn't argue, didn't question, didn't search for proof. He simply stood there, holding what remained of her legacy, and accepted what he had not been able to accept before. She had not been waiting. She had been transforming, becoming something that no longer required him to complete her story, because she had already written her ending. Somewhere beyond the reach of bonds, crowns, and regret. Beyond the moonlight. She existed. And in that distant, unreachable place, she finally let go of the part of her that once loved him.